Good afternoon, UPC family and friends. My name is Atsuko Tamura, and I am the Executive Director of Operations, and I'm also amicably known as COVID Queen. That's just to bring a little bit of lightness. Right now, we have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Daniel Chin. Daniel is currently an active elder here at UPC, and we are so blessed to have his spiritual leadership and also his experience professionally as a doctor, a scientist, and a global health expert and a background in epidemiology. He's also written 3 articles that have been published in Christianity Today since the pandemic has hit. And he has also pulled together our kindred churches, which is ECC, Damascus, and also Westside Presbyterian. And we have met at least once a month, maybe twice a month, ever since the pandemic has hit. And we have prayed together, we have prayed for our congregations, and we have really tried to understand what the virus is doing and how best we can look out for the spiritual health and also the physical health of our respective congregations. So as we now hit into this time where regathering is right in the horizon, and we are so excited about regathering, but we also know that we still have a virus and vaccine rollout to contend with. And there's a lot of information out there. And so just last week, Dr. Chin shared the presentation that you're about to see with our session. And we thought it would be really helpful to share this with the congregation. And so I thank Daniel for taking this time to share this with us. And so all of you can hear the same information that we're hearing. And I know that there's a lot out there. And so we are just thankful for Daniel. Thank you again. And we thank you, UPC, for your patience, your understanding, your questions, and also just being super eager to get back together. We are as eager. We all are, aren't we? So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chin, and he's going to go over some presentation slides and just tell you what is going on with the virus and the vaccine. So with that, I'm going to turn over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Atsuko. It's really a joy to just be able to spend this next 10 minutes or so just to update all of you on probably the latest science and also how we can apply this really to our church. I was just so excited. My wife and I were so excited this past Sunday to regather with others in the sanctuary at 8:30 service. And so I, like you, also want to gather together with others and really saw the joy of that. So we look forward to be able to do that. However, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. And so I think there are a lot of questions because what we see in society is there are a lot of different points of views. And so we just thought that as a congregation, we wanted to be able to move forward with the best science that's available, knowing that that changes over time, as well as being able to apply that in a loving way to serve one another. So that's really the reason I was asked to give a update to the session a week ago, and I just want to share this with you. Hopefully that will be helpful for our church and all churches, even other churches, as we find a way forward here. So let me just share screen with you, and Azuko, I suppose you can see that. Let me know if that's true.
I can see it.
Great.
I think
Okay.
here
Yep,
we
I need
go.
to check
Presentation mode. You got it. So I'm going to mute myself.
Sure. Yeah, so I want to just start by reminding everybody about the pandemic in King County over the past 15 months. As you can see on this slide, we've gone through 4 waves of COVID, right? Beginning in last March and then last summer. And of course, this huge peak that was just devastating for the entire country in November, December, and finally ebbing. The epidemic started to ebb in January, but even then we saw a 4th wave in King County. Now, as we go through this pandemic, it's interesting that for me I kind of mapped this to the kind of intervention that was instituted by the governor over this period of time. And I put it in kind of like, these are some of the things that happen. As you can see, every time we hit a peak, right? This peak, as you see here, the government, kind of like the governor instituted new restrictions, right? Stay-at-home order, pausing reopening, increasing restriction, and reimposing many different restrictions that you are well aware of. And so every time there was a peak, we instituted these restrictions, and look what happened. Things came down, right? Every single time. And that's how the virus works. We've been in this pandemic for 15 months. We have now, our scientists have been great in telling us exactly how this virus works. We know what happens. And we also know that when that happens and restrictions and lockdowns and, people, use of face mask and other interventions are very effective in cutting down the transmission of the virus and slowing the pandemic. So that's what happened. But every single time, as you see, that with the pandemic coming down because of increased restrictions, there have been easing of these restrictions, right? Every time. This is what the yellow boxes, call-out boxes telling us. These are the easing of restrictions. And every time there's been easing of restrictions, look what happened. There's been a recurrence of the pandemic. And that's what we're seeing, cycle after cycle after cycle. Except for the last cycle, which is what we see here. As you can see, the governor eased these restrictions. There was an uptick, but look what happened. It didn't keep going up. It didn't stay up. Then it started coming down. As a matter of fact, it came down really rapidly over the last month, between middle of April to the middle of May. And it's been staying around here. Now, there's a little bit of an uptick about the last a week or two. And then the latest data showing is probably coming down again. So we're kind of hitting this kind of stage where it seems to be stabilizing. But the difference is that the society didn't lock down further. There were no further restrictions. Okay, so what's the difference? As you know, the difference is because of increasing proportion of people in Washington and in King County have been vaccinated against COVID. The latest data, which is extremely encouraging, tells us that as of today, this is the latest data that I looked on the website, 76% of King County residents or 12 years old or older have gotten at least one dose of the vaccine, and 66% have gotten 2 doses, have been fully vaccinated. That's incredible. That's really encouraging. And it's really as a result of this that we're seeing a drop in the cases associated with decreased hospitalization and deaths as a result of the vaccine. So vaccines really work. And getting vaccinated is not only good for the individual, but it's good for society. However, the only last thing I want to say is these are extremely encouraging things, except we're not quite there yet, right? That's why there's been a small uptick. We hope that that's temporary. It will go back down as vaccination further increases. But it shows that the virus is not easy to beat. We are not at what we call herd immunity. We're not at 80% of vaccinated people, which is where most scientists believe is necessary to really beat this pandemic down. And at the same time, as you have all heard, there are these more transmissible variants. So we're not out of the woods, but look at the encouraging sign that we're talking about. So let me remind you again of how the vaccines work and why they're so effective, right? So without vaccination, we know that, let's say if a person comes in contact with a friend who has infected with COVID, who has COVID, he can get infected. And after getting infected, we already know about 10 to 15% of those individuals end up in the hospital, and a small percentage of people will die. Many will end up in ICU, some may die. In addition, this person who is newly infected can infect other people they're in close contact with, for instance, their family members. And so this is what has perpetuated the pandemic in wave after waves. What is the difference? The difference is now we got a vaccine. And what does the vaccine do? Number one, it greatly protects us against the infection. So even if a vaccinated person come in contact with another person who has COVID, depending upon the vaccine, we're talking about anywhere from 70 to 90 to 95% effective in protecting against getting infected. And regardless of the vaccine that we're currently using, whether the Pfizer or the Moderna or the J&J vaccine, all of them, all three of them, actually essentially eliminates the need for hospitalization and serious complication from COVID. That's really good news. What that means is that it makes getting infected with COVID more like a common cold than a serious complication like serious pneumonia and death. And this is actually really, really important. But in addition to that, we now also have information knowing that not only does it reduce the likelihood of getting infected, greatly reduce the risk of complication, it also greatly reduced the ability of an infected person, even after vaccination. They could get infected, very small percentage get infected, but then it greatly reduces their ability to transmit to others. And that's really, really good news. Okay, so not only does it help the individual, it now helps us the society to control this this disease, okay, this pandemic. And so what does this mean? It means that it is actually now very safe for fully vaccinated persons to gather indoor or outdoor without masks or social distancing. That's the really good news, right? That's really getting back to normal. And why is that? It means that for a vaccinated person, first of all, the risk of getting infected is low. But after that, the risk of transmitting to others is low. So if you got vaccinated people together with other vaccinated people, even if they do transmit in a very, very small percentage of those people who get infected, the infected individual, if he or she are also vaccinated, then that person is protected. So that makes it really, really safe. And that's really where we are, right? It is safe, and I think we need to emphasize this. That is the current science. It is safe for fully vaccinated persons to gather indoor and outdoor without masks or social distancing. And that is the current science, and that is what the US CDC has recommended. So then the question is, well, then what should the church do? Should we just simply open it and et cetera? How do we move forward? And one of the major things that we're finding is that as the society has opened up, we're finding that many people need time to acclimate to regathering. Some, even after vaccination, are really uncomfortable to gather together with others without masks or social distance. And that's just fact. It's not as if they don't, these individuals don't believe in the science or don't know the science, but it's kind of like psychological. And I think all of us feel that way. I don't know if you feel that way like I do. I know I can walk into a store, having been fully vaccinated to get groceries, and I don't have to wear a mask, but I still do. I just kind of maybe I feel a little bit better. Maybe I just feel like I can make other people feel better, etc. Right? So what we're seeing is that there is just amount of time for people to acclimate, and that's what we're dealing with right now. We just started regathering in our churches, and so there are individuals who want to continue to want to regather, but they're not comfortable to gather unless people are wearing face masks. I think this is not too dissimilar. As a matter of fact, I see this as a kind of like direct application of Paul's example in 1 Corinthians 9, right? And we know that where Paul willingly gave up his personal rights for the sake of others. And so I wonder if Paul was in our situation today and talking with us, perhaps he might say, it is definitely lawful for you to not wear a mask when you gather with other vaccinated people, but maybe it's not the most helpful to them. And so if by masking as we gather with others, if by masking we can actually bring more people together for worship at this time, perhaps that's the better option. So, and that's what churches are struggling with right now. Every single church, we've been talking with different churches. This is a very common challenge. I think there are different options that we can deal with for this transition period of time, going from no gathering for 15 months to now gathering for the first time. I do think that we do need to have some of these options available. And different churches can take different options. Like, for instance, we could say, for now, as we have vaccinated services and gatherings, everybody wear a face mask for a period of time. Or we can also say, well, we want to make masks optional for people. We encourage, but we can make it optional. That's another option that people can do. Or we can also say, well, within a given in the sanctuary, we can set aside certain sections for people who feel like I really don't want a mask because I don't need to, as well as another section where masking can be optional and then people may feel comfortable masking. So there are many options that churches can take, and churches may want to do that in different steps over time. Obviously the most, I guess, you want to use the word conservative would be to say, let's mask everybody for a period of time. And that's what UPC is doing. And I think it's the right thing to do, but every church will be a little bit different. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about, well, when can we allow vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals to come together? Because that's what we ultimately really want. We don't want to have only something that vaccinated individuals can participate. We want everybody to participate. And I know that our church and other churches have, for a period of time now, implemented outdoor services. So let me just say, in my January article in Christianity Today, I gave a much more details outlining this stepwise approach. But just simply saying, I would just want to say that if we want to bring vaccinated and unvaccinated people together, then we have to follow the signs of transmission. We have to take into account the fact that the virus is circulating in our community, and it is primarily circulating among unvaccinated people. And so we need to do this, not so much, let's say, all the things I'm going to talk about, not so much for the vaccinated individuals, but it's really to protect the unvaccinated from getting infected, because they're the ones who are at risk. And so what I have suggested is that we take a stepwise approach whereby we consider the risk of community transmission into the equation. The higher the level of community transmission, the greater the risk for the unvaccinated. And so therefore, we don't want to have mixed gatherings when there's high transmission and high infection rate. And so that's why at high infection rate, we can gather outdoors, right? It's safe. Outdoor air is wonderful. But as the community infection rate declines, then we can implement home small groups, and then indoor worship, and then indoor Sunday school, and then finally indoor fellowship. And I have at least made some suggestions about, based upon some of the experiences and recommendations around the country as to the level of the infection that would allow us to move from one step to the next step. And as you can see, these are 10 to 12 represent number of cases per 100,000 resident, which is a key number that people use in terms of, or to move into indoor worship with mixed vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals when we get to 5 or 6, okay? And then indoor Sunday school a little bit later. Now, what's the rationale with that is because, as we gather together, we have to consider what I call the 3 C's and the 1 M. And the 3 C's are, the first C is really we have to consider when we gather together about whether we're in crowded spaces or not. So in other words, when infection rate is high, we should be gathering with smaller number of people, and we should be further apart from each other, okay? But as the infection rate declines in the community, then we can have larger gatherings and we can be closer together. Again, this is talking about mixed, regardless of vaccination status, okay? So that's the first C that we have to consider. The second C is really closed spaces, right? With high infection rate, we should be gathering in large rooms with very good, excellent ventilation. But as the infection rate declines, then we can be in smaller rooms. And then ventilation can be less. And this is why, for instance, worshiping in a sanctuary is safer than meeting together in Sunday schools, where we typically meet in much smaller rooms. The last thing is really the contact time, right? When our infection rate is high, the amount of time should be shorter. But as the infection rate drops, we can meet for longer and longer period of time. But as we gather together, it's really important to remind ourselves that we should be continuing to use face masks when we're gathering with vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. Again, this is primarily to protect the unvaccinated. So this is kind of where we are. So where are we today? Remember the little bit of the first graph that I showed you about where we're in the pandemic? As a matter of fact, we are actually very close right now to 6. As a matter of fact, about a week and a half ago, we were at less than 7 cases, 100,000. So we're really close to this threshold that I'm talking about. Unfortunately, things have gone back up a little bit. So now went up closer to 9. Now, the last couple of days I've been tracking this is kind of dropping down to 8 or 7. So I'm pretty optimistic that we will eventually get less than 5, and we will be able to gather indoor with mixed worship. But right now, for the sake of the unvaccinated, to protect them, I think the correct decision is not to have mixed worship, but at least not indoor. It's perfectly okay to do it outdoors, but not indoor. But I would anticipate that very soon, as vaccination rate continue to increase, and we'll be tracking this very closely, we will be able to get the mixed vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals together. I want to say one last thing about young children, because they are in a way a special category. You know that children under 12 are not eligible for vaccination, but there are many young families with young children who would love to be able to come to church, who would bring their kids into worship. I think it's actually okay to do that because young children is a little bit of a special group in the sense, right? Mainly, they are they can obviously be infected. They're susceptible to infection. They also can transmit to other people. But if you think about where they are at right now, even if they are in a family where the rest of the family members are vaccinated, so therefore, when the children gather together with others, let's say, for instance, they may get infected. However, when they bring it home, it doesn't affect the family, right? There's no onward transmission from that. They're not a vector to bring the transmission into the home to other family members. So for fully vaccinated, kind of families with fully vaccinated youths and adults, I think that it is safe to bring them into worship service. However, when they come, they should be wearing face masks because we want to protect them, and they should be social distancing from other people. So I can see that happening. I can also see that churches may want to start with just vaccinated adults and then move the next step into allowing families with young children who are unvaccinated, but then provide special sections for them where they can be social distanced from others and they're wearing face masks. So yeah, this is a work in progress. I just want to hopefully this update has been useful to you. And so I'll just turn the time back over to Azuko, and I will stop share. Azuko, you're on mute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, Daniel. So helpful and hopeful. I want to emphasize the latter part, which is the hopeful part. And I appreciate you too also remembering 1 Corinthians 9. I just know, and the way that you also talked about, this is what science is saying and what we can do, and how we apply it is to phase it in, because one of the things that at the church that we are trying to do, and this is for our staff as well, is we've all been isolated for a long time. We're excited to get together, but there's also anxieties that come with that too, of what's it going to be like to be around people. There are those who love to be, we're excited and an elbow bump feels like a great hug. And then there's those that want to hug, and being around people in 3D requires a level of energy that we might not have, we're not really muscled yet on right now. So we're going to have to get back in shape, so to speak, but it's an exciting one. And so I hope that this presentation that Daniel just provided for you is helpful. As he talked about in one of the earlier slides, is we are right now gathering with vaccinated, wearing masks in the sanctuary. Just last week we did that, and we maintained social distancing. The second one is this week on Sunday, which will be the 6th. we're going to add in, we're going to open it up just a little bit more and bring that distance down just a little bit more to 4 feet in between instead of 6 feet. And so that'll get us more people coming in. The exciting thing for us is that we were full based upon the number of pods that we had created. And so we're excited, we're eager, and we feel encouraged because people are looking forward to coming back to the sanctuary and worshiping together. While we do that, we also know that we have built an online presence. And so right now, what you'll see from the front is you'll see Pastor George and our worship team addressing a room full of people, which is so exciting for them, but also on occasion, quite frequently looking right at the camera. And so we're all learning what it means now to be a multi-channel church, and how do we address all of the worship audiences that we have, and those coming from all over the world too. We have a small group chat that meets who comes from Indonesia every Sunday. And so there have been blessings through all of this, even though it has been incredibly challenging for all of us. And so the other encouraging note that Daniel shared is that as science has shown us, how do we bring back our children, and how do we help our families with small kids who have really felt the brunt of this struggle, being isolated. And so we've got plans in the works. Jennifer Kenny and Jill and Phil and Taylor have been doing an incredible job of reaching out to families and their kids throughout the year. And there are programs and some events that are being planned that will be on site at UPC. So please stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, we are going to be thoughtful. We do want to make sure that we are prayerfully considering the most vulnerable. And we're also looking out for each of your spiritual health too. And so we just ask for continued prayer, continued patience, and a readiness to pivot when we need to, depending on what the data tells us, just to be safe and to continue to be on mission together. And so what you can do is you can look to the Regather page on our website, and we will do our best to keep that updated. And if you've got specific questions or comments, please send them to covid@upc.org. And the day that we no longer have to use that email alias will be a day that we will jump up and down and celebrate. And we may even ask George to wear his green pants. And so with that, Daniel, thank you so much for your leadership, your expertise, and just your prayerful heart. We are so grateful. And we will see all of you hopefully soon on Sunday. Bye.